The champagne glass slipped from my hand and shattered against the marble floor of the ballroom, but nobody noticed. They were all too busy laughing at what my sister Carmen had just said about me. The crystal fragments caught the bright lights overhead, sparkling like the tears I refused to let fall as I stood there in my carefully chosen dress, feeling smaller than I ever had in my 28 years of life. I mean, look at her, Carmen continued, her voice carrying across the crowded engagement party as she gestured toward me with her perfectly manicured hand. Standing there like she actually belongs here with all these beautiful people. It's almost sad, really. The laughter grew louder. These people, Carmen's friends, the country club crowd she'd married into through her relationship with Robert Sterling, they ate this up. They lived for moments like this, when someone could be torn down for their entertainment. And tonight that someone was me. "Carmen, please," I whispered, but my voice was lost in the noise of the party. The string quartet kept playing in the corner as if nothing had happened. As if my world hadn't just been destroyed in front of 100 people. My sister threw back her head and laughed, her blonde hair catching the light like spun gold. She was beautiful, I had to admit that. She always had been. Where I was soft and curvy, she was lean and athletic. Where my dark skin sometimes felt too plain to me, her lighter complexion seemed to glow. She knew how to dress, how to stand, how to command attention in any room she entered. "Oh, Natasha," she said, walking over to me in her designer heels, the ones that probably cost more than my rent. "I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just being honest. You know honesty is important in families, right?" The crowd had formed a circle around us now, like we were performers in some twisted show. I could see Robert standing behind Carmen, his face red with embarrassment, but not for me. He was embarrassed that his fiancée was making a scene. He caught my eye and shook his head slightly as if to say, "Here she goes again." "I just think," Carmen continued, her voice getting louder as she warmed to her audience, "that you should know your place. Some of us are meant to be in the spotlight and others—" She looked me up and down with obvious disgust. "Others are meant to stay in the background where they belong." Mrs. Patterson, one of the country club ladies, tittered behind her jeweled hand. "Carmen, you're terrible," she said, but she was smiling as she said it. "I'm practical," Carmen replied. "Look at her outfit. That dress probably came from some discount store, and those shoes." She actually pointed at my feet. "I mean, who wears shoes like that to an engagement party at the Riverside Country Club?" I looked down at my black dress, the one I'd saved up for 3 months to buy. It wasn't designer, but it was pretty. At least, I thought it was pretty when I put it on tonight. I'd spent an hour doing my makeup, trying to look good for my sister's big night. I'd wanted to celebrate with her, to be happy for her. But nothing I did was ever good enough for Carmen. You know what the sad part is? Carmen was really hitting her stride now. She actually tried tonight. Look at all that makeup. She must have spent hours trying to make herself look presentable. She laughed again. "But you can't polish a rock and make it a diamond, can you?" The room erupted in laughter again. I felt my face burning with shame and anger. Part of me wanted to run, to push through the crowd and escape to my car and drive home to my small apartment where nobody could see me cry. But something else was building inside me, something I'd kept buried for 28 years of Carmen's cruelty. "And the best part," Carmen said, turning to address the crowd like she was giving a speech, "is that she actually thought she looked good tonight. Can you imagine? The confidence it takes to walk into a place like this looking like that." Robert finally stepped forward and put his hand on Carmen's arm. "Honey, maybe we should." "Should what?" Carmen snapped, jerking away from him. "Should pretend that my sister isn't embarrassing our entire family by showing up here looking like she crawled out of a thrift store? Should I lie and tell her she looks nice when we both know she looks ridiculous?" I found my voice then, somehow. "I'm your sister," I said quietly. "Unfortunately," Carmen replied without missing a beat. "Trust me, if I could choose my family, you wouldn't be in it." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the string quartet seemed to pause for a moment. I looked around the room at all these faces, these people who didn't know me but were perfectly willing to laugh at my pain because Carmen had given them permission to do so. "You know what, Carmen?" I said, my voice getting stronger. "You're right about one thing." She raised her eyebrows, clearly not expecting me to fight back. "Oh really? What's that?" "You can't choose your family," I said, meeting her eyes directly for the first time all evening. "But you can choose how you treat them." Carmen's smile faltered slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, bending down to pick up the larger pieces of the champagne glass I'd dropped, "that families should build each other up, not tear each other down in front of strangers." I stood up, the glass fragments in my palm, and looked at my sister. really looked at her. For the first time, I saw past the beautiful exterior to what was underneath. I saw the insecurity that drove her to make herself feel bigger by making others feel smaller. I saw the fear that someone might see through her perfect facade. And I saw something else too, the knowledge that she'd gone too far tonight even for her. "Congratulations on your engagement," I said calmly. "I hope you and Robert are very happy together." I walked toward the exit, my head held high despite the whispers and stares that followed me. As I reached the door, I heard Robert's voice behind me. "Natasha, wait." I turned back to see him jogging after me, leaving Carmen standing alone in the middle of her circle of friends. "I'm sorry," he said when he reached me. "She didn't mean." "Yes, she did," I interrupted. "Carmen always means exactly what she says when it comes to me." Robert looked uncomfortable. He was a handsome man, I had to admit. Tall, well-dressed, successful. Everything Carmen had always said she wanted in a husband. But looking at him now, I wondered what he really saw in my sister, and what she really saw in him beyond his bank account and social status. "She's just stressed about the wedding," he said. "You know how brides get." "No," I said. "I don't know how brides get because I've never been one. But I do know how sisters are supposed to treat each other, and this isn't it." I pushed through the door and walked out into the cool evening air. Behind me, I could hear the party continuing, the laughter starting up again as if nothing had happened. As if I had never been there at all. But something had changed tonight. Something fundamental had shifted inside me as I stood there listening to my sister destroy me in front of all those people. For 28 years, I'd taken Carmen's abuse because she was family. Because I thought that's what love looked like in our family. Because I'd been taught to believe that her opinion of me mattered more than my own opinion of myself. Not anymore. As I walked to my car, the sound of the party fading behind me, I made a decision. Carmen wanted to play games? She wanted to humiliate me and tear me down because she thought I was weak? She was about to learn just how wrong she was. The drive home from the country club passed in a blur of streetlights and half-formed thoughts. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles hurt, but I couldn't seem to loosen my grip. Every time I tried to relax, I heard Carmen's voice again, echoing in my head like a broken record. "You can't polish a rock and make it a diamond." I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex and sat in my car for a long moment, staring up at the building I called home. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom place in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy but clean and safe. I'd been proud when I'd saved up enough to move out of the studio apartment I'd lived in for years. But now, thinking about Carmen's mansion with Robert, about the life of luxury she was stepping into, my little apartment felt pathetic. Oh. I shook my head, forcing those thoughts away. My apartment was mine. I'd earned it with my job at the marketing firm, working my way up from receptionist to account coordinator over the past 5 years. It might not be a mansion, but it represented something Carmen had never understood: independence. I climbed the stairs to my second-floor apartment, my feet aching in the shoes Carmen had mocked. Once inside, I kicked them off and sank onto my couch, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what had happened tonight. The tears came then, hot and angry and long overdue. This wasn't the first time Carmen had humiliated me. Growing up, she'd made an art form out of it. When we were kids, she'd invite friends over just so she could show them how much smarter, prettier, more popular she was than her younger sister. She'd accidentally spill things on my clothes before school events. She'd tell people embarrassing stories about me, always with a laugh that said it was just harmless fun. But it had never felt harmless to me. When we got older, it got worse. Carmen would show up at my college events and somehow manage to become the center of attention, leaving me feeling invisible. She'd date boys I liked, not because she was interested in them, but because she could. She'd make comments about my weight, my clothes, my career choices, always wrapped in fake concern that made it impossible to call her out without looking like the bad guy. "I'm just worried about you," she'd say. "I want what's best for you." But what was best for me, according to Carmen, was always to stay small, stay quiet, and stay out of her way. Our parents had never seen it. To them, Carmen was the golden child who could do no wrong, and I was the sensitive one who was always overreacting. When I tried to tell them how Carmen treated me, they'd brush it off as normal sister rivalry. "You girls need to work it out between yourselves," Mom would say. "Family is family." But family wasn't supposed to make you feel worthless. I got up and walked to my bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror. My makeup was smudged from crying, and my hair was messy from running my hands through it during the drive home. Carmen was right about one thing: I had tried tonight. I'd spent hours getting ready, hoping to look good, hoping to fit in with her crowd. Why had I cared so much about fitting in with people who were perfectly happy to watch me get torn apart for their entertainment? I washed my face and changed into my pajamas, then made myself a cup of tea and sat back down on the couch. The silence in my apartment felt strange after the noise and chaos of the engagement party. But it was peaceful too, in a way that I hadn't appreciated before tonight. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I hoped it might be an apology from Carmen, or at least an acknowledgement that she'd gone too far. But it was from my coworker Jessica. "How was the fancy party? Did you have fun with the rich people?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "It was interesting." "That bad, huh? Want to talk about it?" Jessica was one of the few people who knew about my complicated relationship with Carmen. She'd never met my sister, but she'd heard enough stories over the years to understand why family gatherings were always stressful for me. "Maybe tomorrow," I typed back. "Still processing." "Okay. But remember what I always tell you, you don't owe anyone your happiness, not even family." I set my phone aside and thought about Jessica's words. She was right, of course. I'd spent so many years trying to win Carmen's approval, trying to be good enough to earn her love and respect. But tonight had made it clear that nothing I did would ever be enough. In Carmen's eyes, I would always be the ugly little sister who didn't deserve to share the same air as her. Well, if that's how she wanted to play it, fine. I grabbed my laptop and opened it, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I wasn't sure what I was planning to do, but I knew I needed to do something. I couldn't just go back to the way things were, pretending everything was fine, letting Carmen walk all over me whenever she felt like it. I started typing, not sure where the words were coming from. Carmen has always been the beautiful one, the successful one, the one everyone loves. And I've always been okay with that, or at least I thought I was. I was content to be the supportive little sister, cheering her on from the sidelines, celebrating her victories as if they were my own. I paused, reading what I'd written. It was true, but it was only part of the truth. But tonight she crossed a line. Tonight she decided that it wasn't enough to be better than me, she had to make sure everyone else knew it too. She had to humiliate me in front of a room full of strangers, had to tear me down to build herself up. My fingers moved faster now, the words pouring out like they'd been waiting years to be written. I've spent my whole life making excuses for her behavior, telling myself that she doesn't mean it, that she's just competitive, that this is just how she shows love. But love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't make you feel small and worthless and ashamed of who you are. I stopped typing and leaned back, looking at what I'd written. It felt good to get it out, to put words to feelings I'd been carrying around for so long. But words weren't enough anymore. Carmen had made this war public tonight. She'd involved other people, made them complicit in her cruelty. If she wanted a war, I'd give her one. But I wouldn't fight dirty like she did. I wouldn't stoop to her level of petty cruelty and public humiliation. No, I'd be smarter than that. I'd find a way to show her, and everyone else, exactly who she really was underneath all that beauty and charm. I closed the laptop and finished my tea, my mind already spinning with possibilities. Carmen thought she'd won tonight. She thought she'd put me in my place once and for all, reminded me of my position in the family hierarchy. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The anger from the night before had crystallized into something else: determination. I got dressed for work carefully, choosing a blue dress that made me feel confident and professional. I did my makeup with care, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I wanted to look like the competent, successful woman I was. Carmen might have convinced me for a while that I was less than her, but I wasn't going to let her convince me anymore. At work, I threw myself into my projects with renewed energy. My boss, Patricia, noticed the difference right away. "You seem different today," she said when she stopped by my desk. "Good different. More focused." "I am," I told her. "I think I'm finally ready to stop letting other people define who I am." Patricia smiled. "Well, whatever's brought about this change, I like it. Keep it up." I spent my lunch break thinking about Carmen's wedding, which was still 2 months away. 2 months to plan, to prepare, to figure out exactly how I was going to handle this. I wasn't going to do anything crazy or illegal or harmful. I just wanted Carmen to understand how it felt to be humiliated in front of people who mattered to her. I wanted her to learn that actions have consequences, even for beautiful, charming people who think they can say whatever they want without repercussions. I wanted her to learn that her ugly little sister wasn't as weak as she thought. 3 weeks after the engagement party, I was grocery shopping at the upscale market near Carmen's neighborhood when I saw him. Robert was standing in the wine section, but he wasn't alone. A tall woman with auburn hair was pressed close to him, her hand resting on his chest as she whispered something in his ear that made him laugh. I ducked behind a display of imported cheeses, my heart racing. This woman definitely wasn't Carmen. Carmen was blonde, petite, always perfectly put together. This woman was taller, more casual in her jeans and sweater, but undeniably beautiful in a natural way that Carmen would have hated. I watched as Robert's hand moved to the small of the woman's back, a gesture that was intimate and familiar. They weren't just friends. The way they stood together, the way she looked at him, the way he touched her. This was definitely more than friendship. Robert Sterling, Carmen's perfect fiancé, was cheating on her. I should have felt satisfaction at this discovery. After what Carmen had done to me at the engagement party, part of me wanted to see her world fall apart. But mostly I felt sick. Not because I cared about Robert, I barely knew him, but because I knew how much this would destroy Carmen when she found out. Despite everything she'd done to me, she was still my sister. And she was clearly head over heels in love with Robert, or at least with the idea of the life he represented. I followed them at a distance as they moved through the store, staying far enough back that they wouldn't notice me but close enough to observe their behavior. They were comfortable together, clearly not worried about being seen. The woman picked up ingredients while Robert carried the basket, and they moved through the store like a couple who shopped together regularly. When they got to the checkout line, I positioned myself where I could hear their conversation. "Should we get flowers for tonight?" the woman asked, running her hand along Robert's arm. "Anna, you know I love your cooking, but you don't need to go overboard," Robert replied, leaning down to kiss her temple. "Besides, we don't have that much time before I have to get back." Anna. So now I had a name. "I still can't believe you're actually going through with this wedding," Anna said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Robert glanced around nervously before answering. "We've talked about this. Carmen and I, it makes sense. Her family has connections and the merger will be good for business. It's not just about what I want anymore." "But you don't love her," Anna said. "It wasn't a question." "Love is complicated," Robert said. "Carmen is beautiful, she's from the right family, she fits into my world perfectly. Sometimes that's enough." "And what about us?" Anna asked. Robert cupped her face in his hands. "Us is different. Us is real. Carmen will never have to know, and after we're married, we'll figure out how to make this work." I felt my stomach turn. He was planning to marry my sister while continuing his affair with Anna. Carmen might be cruel and selfish, but she didn't deserve this. No one deserved this. I watched them pay for their groceries and leave the store together, getting into Robert's expensive car. I stood there for a long moment, processing what I'd just witnessed. This changed everything. When I got home, I sat in my apartment trying to figure out what to do with this information. My first instinct was to call Carmen immediately and tell her what I'd seen. But then I remembered the engagement party, remembered how she'd humiliated me in front of all those people, remembered the years of cruelty and emotional abuse. Why should I protect her from the consequences of her own poor judgment? But this felt different from our usual sibling drama. This was about her future, her life. If she married Robert not knowing about Anna, she'd be building her entire marriage on a lie. I paced around my apartment for hours, my phone in my hand, Carmen's number pulled up on the screen. All I had to do was press call and tell her what I'd seen. It would be the right thing to do, the sisterly thing to do. But then I thought about something else Robert had said. Carmen is from the right family, she fits into my world perfectly. He was marrying her for her connections, for her family's social status. Not for love. Carmen thought she was getting her fairy tale romance, but she was really just getting a business transaction. Maybe she deserved to know that too. I put my phone down and opened my laptop instead. If I was going to tell Carmen about Robert's affair, I wanted to be sure I had my facts straight. I needed more than just one encounter at a grocery store. Over the next few days, I found myself driving by places where I thought I might see Robert and Anna together. I felt like a stalker, but I told myself I was just gathering information. I needed to be certain about what I'd seen before I decided what to do with it. On Thursday evening, I struck gold. I was sitting in my car outside a restaurant downtown when I saw them again. This time, they were holding hands as they walked in and Robert's car was parked in the lot. I waited for about an hour, then saw them come out together. Anna got into a red Toyota and Robert got into his BMW. They drove in different directions. I followed Anna. She led me to an apartment complex about 15 minutes away. I watched her park and go inside, noting which building and which floor. When the lights came on in a third-floor apartment, I wrote down the apartment number. The next day, I did something I never thought I would do. I called in sick to work and spent the morning doing research. I found Anna's full name in the apartment directory, Anna Mitchell. A quick internet search revealed that she worked as a graphic designer for a small firm across town. I drove to her workplace and waited in the parking lot until I saw her come out for lunch. She was even prettier up close, with kind eyes and an easy smile. She looked like the type of person who would be horrified to learn she was helping a man cheat on his fiancée. But that wasn't my problem to solve. That evening, I drove back to the apartment complex and waited. At around 6 o'clock, Robert's BMW pulled into the parking lot. I watched him go upstairs, and a few minutes later, I saw him and Anna silhouetted in the window of her apartment. I sat there for 3 hours taking pictures with my phone whenever they appeared in the window. Nothing inappropriate. I wasn't trying to be creepy. Just evidence that Robert was spending time at another woman's apartment while engaged to my sister. When Robert finally left at around 9 o'clock, I followed him. He drove straight to Carmen's house, the massive colonial in the expensive part of town that she shared with him. I watched him use his key to let himself in, watched the lights come on in what I knew was their bedroom. He was living a double life and doing it so smoothly that Carmen had no idea. I drove home with a memory card full of photos and a head full of thoughts. I had evidence now. Solid, undeniable proof that Robert was cheating on Carmen. The question was what to do with it. I could confront Robert directly, give him a chance to come clean to Carmen himself. But I didn't trust him to do the right thing. He'd probably just lie and deny everything, maybe even convince Carmen that I was making it up out of jealousy. I could go to Carmen privately, show her the photos, let her handle it however she wanted. But after the engagement party, I wasn't sure she deserved my discretion and kindness. Or I could do something else entirely. I thought about the wedding still 6 weeks away. Carmen had been planning it for months, talking about nothing else whenever we spoke. She'd booked the most expensive venue in the city, hired the best caterer, invited 300 guests. She'd spent more on her dress than I made in 3 months. It was going to be the social event of the season, at least in her circle. Everyone who mattered to Carmen would be there, all dressed up and ready to celebrate her perfect life with her perfect husband. What would happen if, in the middle of all that perfection, the truth came out? I opened my laptop and looked at the photos I'd taken. They were clear, unmistakable evidence of Robert's affair. In one, you could see him kissing Anna in her apartment doorway. In another, they were holding hands as they walked to his car. Carmen had humiliated me in front of her friends. She'd made sure everyone at that engagement party knew exactly what she thought of me, exactly how little I mattered to her. Maybe it was time she learned how it felt to be humiliated in front of people who mattered to her. I started planning. The idea came to me on a Tuesday morning while I was drinking coffee and scrolling through social media. Carmen had posted yet another photo of her wedding preparations. This time a picture of her custom-made invitations laid out on what looked like a marble table. The caption read, "Can't wait to start my perfect life with my perfect man. 6 weeks to go. #blessed, #perfect couple, #dreams come true." The comments were full of heart emojis and congratulations from her friends. Mrs. Patterson from the engagement party had written, "You deserve all the happiness in the world, darling." Someone else had commented, "Robert is so lucky to have you." If only they knew. I closed the app and opened my photo gallery, scrolling through the pictures I'd taken of Robert and Anna. In the bright morning light, they looked even more damning than they had when I'd first taken them. There was no mistaking what was happening in these photos. I had power now. Information that could destroy Carmen's perfect wedding, her perfect life, her perfect image. The question was how to use it. I could post the photos on social media, tag Carmen and Robert, let the internet do the rest. But that felt too impersonal, too distant. Besides, Carmen would just delete the post and block me, probably claim the photos were fake or taken out of context. I could print them out and mail them to her, but again she could just throw them away and pretend they didn't exist. She was good at denying reality when it didn't suit her. No, if I was going to do this, I needed to do it in a way that she couldn't ignore, couldn't deny, couldn't sweep under the rug. I needed to do it in front of witnesses, people who mattered to her social standing. I needed to do it at the wedding. The thought sent a chill through me. What I was considering was nuclear. It would destroy not just Carmen's marriage, but her reputation, her social standing, her entire carefully constructed life. It would humiliate her in front of everyone she cared about impressing. It would be exactly what she had done to me multiplied by 100. Part of me felt sick at the thought. Despite everything Carmen had done to me over the years, she was still my sister. We'd shared a childhood, shared parents, shared memories. Did I really want to hurt her this badly? But then I remembered the engagement party. I remembered standing there in that ballroom, listening to her tear me apart for the entertainment of her friends. I remembered the laughter, the way everyone had looked at me like I was some pathetic creature who'd wandered into the wrong place. Carmen had made a choice that night. She'd chosen cruelty over kindness, chosen to build herself up by tearing me down. She'd done it publicly, deliberately, knowing exactly how much it would hurt me. If she could make that choice, then I could make this one. I spent the next few days researching wedding traditions, looking for the perfect moment to reveal what I knew. I considered the rehearsal dinner, but that would be too early. Carmen could still call off the wedding, damage control would be easier. I thought about interrupting the ceremony itself, but that felt too dramatic, too much like a soap opera. Then I found the perfect opportunity, the reception. Specifically, the moment when people traditionally give speeches and present gifts to the happy couple. Carmen had mentioned that she was planning a slideshow of photos from their relationship to play during dinner. It would be projected on a big screen so all 300 guests could see it. What if that slideshow included a few extra photos? The technical aspects wouldn't be too difficult. I worked in marketing, so I knew my way around presentations and audiovisual equipment. Wedding venues always had projectors and screens for exactly this type of thing. All I would need to do was get access to the slideshow file and add my own pictures. But I would need help. I couldn't just walk into the wedding venue and start messing with their equipment. I needed someone on the inside, someone who would be working the event. I started making phone calls. It took me 3 days to track down the right person, but eventually I found him. Tyler, a freelance AV technician who had been hired to handle the slideshow and music for Carmen's reception. He was young, probably in his early 20s, and when I explained that I was the bride's sister and needed to add some last-minute photos to the slideshow, he was happy to help. Sisters are always doing stuff like this, he told me over the phone. Last-minute additions, surprise videos, that kind of thing. No problem at all. Just email me the photos and I'll add them to the presentation. Actually, I said, I was hoping to handle it myself. You know how it is with family photos? I want to make sure they're placed just right, good timing with the music, that sort of thing. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Well, I guess that would be okay. I could give you access to the file a few hours before the reception starts. You could make your changes then. That would be perfect, I said. And Tyler? This is supposed to be a surprise for Carmen, so maybe don't mention it to anyone else. No problem. I love helping with surprises. If only he knew what kind of surprise this was going to be. With Tyler's cooperation secured, I turned my attention to the photos themselves. I had about 20 pictures of Robert and Anna together, but I couldn't use all of them. I needed to choose the most damning ones, the pictures that would tell the story clearly and undeniably. I settled on 5 photos. The first showed Robert and Anna holding hands as they walked into the restaurant. The second was the kiss in Anna's apartment doorway. The third showed them grocery shopping together, clearly comfortable and familiar. The fourth was Robert leaving Anna's apartment building late at night. The fifth was a screenshot I'd managed to capture from Anna's social media. A photo she'd posted of a fancy dinner with the caption, "Amazing night with my love," and Robert's hand visible in the corner of the frame. Together, these 5 photos told a complete story. They showed that Robert was having an affair, that it wasn't a one-time thing but an ongoing relationship, and that it was happening right up until his wedding day. I created a simple slideshow with just these 5 photos, adding captions that made the timeline clear. Robert and Anna, February 14th. Robert leaving Anna's apartment, March 3rd. Anna's Instagram post, March 10th. Then I waited. The hardest part was acting normal around Carmen during the final weeks before the wedding. She called me several times to discuss last-minute details, always in that tone she used when she was doing me a favor by including me in her plans. "I need you to be at the venue by 3 o'clock for photos," she told me during one of these calls. "And please, Natasha, try to look nice. This is going to be in magazines." "I'll do my best," I said. "Wear the dress I picked out for you. The navy one. It's more flattering than your usual choices." I had bought the navy dress she'd selected, even though it cost more than I usually spent on clothes and wasn't really my style. It was conservative, understated, designed to make sure I wouldn't stand out or draw attention away from the bride. Classic Carmen. Even her kindness came with conditions. "I'll wear the navy dress," I confirmed. "Good. And Natasha? I know things have been tense between us lately, but I want you to know that I'm glad you'll be there. Family is important." It was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get from Carmen, and it almost made me reconsider what I was planning. Almost. I wouldn't miss it, I told her, and that was the truth. 2 days before the wedding, I met Tyler at the venue to do a final check of the equipment. The ballroom was beautiful, decorated in white and gold with flowers everywhere. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, which made what I was planning feel even more destructive. "The projector's all set up," Tyler told me, showing me the laptop that would control the slideshow. Your sister's presentation is already loaded. You'll just need to add your photos to the end of the sequence. I nodded, trying to look casual while my heart pounded. What time will the slideshow start during the reception? Usually about an hour into dinner, when people are relaxed and paying attention. It's the perfect time for this kind of surprise. Perfect, I said and meant it. That night I barely slept. I kept going over the plan in my head, looking for flaws, for ways it could go wrong. What if Tyler changed his mind? What if someone else checked the slideshow before it played? What if Carmen saw the photos and somehow managed to stop the presentation? But every time I started to doubt myself, I remembered the engagement party. I remembered Carmen's voice saying, "You can't polish a rock and make it a diamond," while her friends laughed. I remembered the humiliation, the shame, the way she'd made me feel like I was nothing. She'd made her choice that night. Now I was making mine. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Carmen had always said she wanted perfect weather for her perfect day, and it looked like she was going to get it. I got dressed carefully in the navy dress she'd chosen, did my makeup with extra care, and drove to the venue. The next few hours would change everything. The bridal suite at the Riverside Country Club was a flurry of activity when I arrived at 3 o'clock. Carmen was in the center of it all, sitting in a white silk robe while 3 different people worked on her hair, makeup, and nails simultaneously. She looked radiant, glowing with the happiness of a woman who believed she was about to marry the love of her life. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Natasha," she called out when she saw me. "Finally. Come look at my dress." The wedding dress was hanging on a special hook near the window, and I had to admit it was stunning. It was a custom creation that had reportedly cost more than my car, with intricate beadwork and a train that would require 2 people to carry. Carmen had been planning this dress since she was 16, she told me, sketching designs and saving magazine clippings of her dream wedding gown. "It's beautiful," I said, and that was the truth. "Isn't it perfect?" Carmen beamed. "Robert is going to die when he sees me in it." Robert? I wondered where he was right now, what he was doing. Was he getting ready with his groomsmen, nervous and excited about his wedding day? Or was he thinking about Anna, wishing he could be with her instead? "How are you feeling?" I asked Carmen. "Like I'm living in a dream," she said. "I can't believe this day is finally here. Everything is perfect, absolutely perfect." I watched her in the mirror as the makeup artist applied her lipstick. She looked genuinely happy, not just excited about the party or the attention, but truly joyful. For a moment I wavered. Did I really want to destroy this happiness? Did I want to be responsible for shattering her dreams on what was supposed to be the most important day of her life? But then Carmen caught my eye in the mirror and her expression changed slightly. "You look nice," she said, but there was something in her tone that wasn't quite genuine. "That dress is much better on you than I expected." And just like that, my moment of doubt passed. Even on her wedding day, even when she was trying to be kind, Carmen couldn't resist a little dig. She couldn't just give me a compliment without qualifying it, without making it clear that her expectations for me were low. "Thank you," I said simply. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. I helped Carmen get into her dress, watched as the photographer took endless pictures of her getting ready, listened as she gave instructions to the wedding coordinator about last-minute details. Through it all, I kept thinking about the slideshow file waiting on Tyler's laptop downstairs. At 5:30 it was time for photos. We made our way down to the main ballroom, where Robert was waiting with his groomsmen. He looked handsome in his black tuxedo, every inch the perfect groom. When he saw Carmen walking toward him in her wedding dress, his face lit up with what looked like genuine affection. Maybe he did care about her, in his way. Maybe he really thought he could have both Carmen and Anna, keep everyone happy, live his double life forever. Men like Robert often thought they were smart enough to pull off that kind of deception. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The photo session took forever. The photographer posed us in every possible combination. Bride and groom, bride with her family, groom with his family, the whole wedding party together. Carmen was in her element, absolutely glowing as she posed for picture after picture. "Make sure you get my good side," she told the photographer, then laughed at her own joke. "Not that I have a bad side." Robert laughed too, but I noticed that his smile seemed a little forced as the session went on. He kept checking his phone between shots and I wondered if he was texting Anna. At 7 o'clock, guests started arriving for the ceremony. I watched from a window in the bridal suite as cars pulled up to the front of the country club, disgorging elegantly dressed people who had come to celebrate Carmen's big day. I recognized many of them from the engagement party, the same people who had laughed when Carmen humiliated me. They were all here to witness what they thought would be Carmen's triumphant moment. Instead, they were going to see her world fall apart. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I had to admit. Carmen had spared no expense and every detail was perfect. The flowers were gorgeous, the music was lovely, and Carmen looked absolutely radiant as she walked down the aisle on our father's arm. I sat in the front row watching my sister marry a man who was cheating on her, and I felt strangely detached from it all. It was like watching a movie where you knew the ending was going to be tragic, but the characters had no idea what was coming. Robert's vows were particularly hard to listen to. "Carmen," he said, his voice carrying across the silent church, "you are everything I ever dreamed of in a wife. You're beautiful, intelligent, kind, and loving. I promise to be faithful to you, to honor you, to put you first in my life for as long as we both shall live." The words rang hollow in my ears. How could he stand there and promise to be faithful when he'd been with another woman just days ago? How could he talk about putting Carmen first when he was planning to continue his affair after the wedding? But Carmen was crying happy tears, completely believing every word he said. The guests were smiling and dabbing at their eyes with tissues. Even I might have been moved if I didn't know the truth. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. Carmen and Robert kissed and she looked happier than I'd ever seen her. For just a moment she caught my eye and smiled at me, a real smile without any of her usual condescension. That smile almost broke my resolve. But then I remembered why I was doing this. Carmen didn't deserve to live a lie. She deserved to know the truth about the man she'd just married, no matter how much it was going to hurt. The cocktail hour after the ceremony gave me the opportunity I'd been waiting for. While everyone was mingling and drinking champagne, I slipped away from the crowd and found Tyler setting up the audiovisual equipment for the reception. "Perfect timing," he said when he saw me. "I was just getting everything ready. Do you have those photos you wanted to add?" I pulled out the USB drive I'd prepared. "Right here." "Are you sure no one else will see them before the slideshow starts?" "Nope, the presentation won't start until I hit play, and that won't happen until dinner is served and your sister gives me the signal." "Good," I said, handing him the drive. "And remember, this is supposed to be a surprise." Tyler grinned. "I love surprises. This is going to be great." If only he knew. I watched as he loaded my photos onto the laptop, adding them to the end of Carmen's romantic slideshow. On the screen, I could see the innocent pictures Carmen had chosen. Photos of her and Robert on various dates, vacation pictures, images from their engagement. Sweet, romantic photos that told the story of a perfect couple in love. Soon, that story would have a very different ending. "All set," Tyler said, closing the laptop. "This is going to be one memorable wedding reception." I thanked him and returned to the cocktail hour, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. There was no going back now. In a few hours, everyone at this wedding would know the truth about Robert Sterling. Carmen found me by the bar, still glowing with happiness. "Isn't this perfect?" she said, gesturing to the room full of elegantly dressed guests. "Everything is exactly how I imagined it would be." "It's beautiful," I agreed. "I'm so glad you're here, Natasha. I know we don't always get along, but you're my sister. Family is the most important thing." I looked at her, really looked at her. In a few hours, this happiness would be gone. Her perfect wedding, her perfect marriage, her perfect life, all of it would be destroyed. And I would be the one responsible for destroying it. "Yes," I said quietly. "Family is the most important thing." Dinner was served at 8:30, and I found myself seated at a table with some of Carmen's college friends and their husbands. They were nice enough people, the kind who made polite conversation and complimented the decorations and the food. Under normal circumstances, I might have enjoyed their company. But these weren't normal circumstances. I barely touched my food, despite the fact that Carmen had spared no expense on the catering. My stomach was too knotted with nerves to eat much of anything. Every time I looked toward the head table where Carmen and Robert sat, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. Carmen looked absolutely luminous in the soft lighting of the ballroom. She'd changed from her ceremony dress into a simpler but equally elegant reception gown, and she was glowing with happiness as she chatted with the guests at her table. Robert sat beside her, his arm around her chair, playing the role of the devoted new husband perfectly. Every so often he would lean over and whisper something in her ear that would make her laugh, and she would look at him with such pure adoration that it made my chest tight. She really did love him, whatever her faults. She believed she'd married her soulmate, her happily ever after. In about 30 minutes, that belief would be shattered. "The bride looks so happy," said the woman sitting next to me, whose name I'd already forgotten. "They make such a beautiful couple." "Yes," I said, taking a sip of water. "Beautiful." "Have you known Robert long?" asked her husband. I shook my head. Not really. Carmen and Robert have only been together for about a year. Well, when you know, the woman said with a romantic sigh. Love at first sight, right? More like bank account at first sight, I thought, remembering Robert's words about Carmen being from the right family. But I just smiled and nodded. As the main course was cleared away and dessert was served, I noticed Tyler making his way toward the front of the room where the projector was set up. My heart started beating faster. This was it. After weeks of planning, months of enduring Carmen's cruelty, years of being made to feel like I wasn't good enough. This was the moment when everything would change. Carmen stood up and tapped her champagne glass with a spoon, calling for attention. The room gradually quieted as 300 guests turned their attention to the head table. Thank you all so much for being here tonight, Carmen said, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. Robert and I are so grateful to have all our favorite people here to celebrate with us. She paused, looking around the room with a smile that was pure joy. Before we continue with the festivities, I have a little surprise for my new husband. I put together a slideshow of some of our favorite memories together, from our first date right up until today. I hope you'll all enjoy taking this little journey with us. The guests murmured appreciatively, and I saw people shifting in their chairs to get a better view of the large screen that had been set up at the front of the room. Carmen sat back down, reaching for Robert's hand as the lights dimmed. This is so sweet, the woman next to me whispered. I watched Tyler at his station, saw him open the laptop and prepare to start the presentation. He caught my eye across the room and gave me a small thumbs up, thinking he was helping me surprise my sister with some additional family photos. The slideshow began with a romantic song, something soft and sweet that Carmen had probably chosen specifically for this moment. The first photo appeared on the screen, Carmen and Robert at what looked like their first official date, both dressed up and smiling at the camera. A collective "ah" went up from the crowd. More photos followed, chronicling their relationship. Carmen and Robert at charity events, on vacation in the Caribbean, at family gatherings. They really did look happy together in these pictures, and I could see why Carmen had fallen for him. He was handsome, charming, and he seemed to genuinely enjoy her company in these moments. But I knew what was coming. The slideshow continued for about 10 minutes, showing the progression of their relationship from dating to engagement to wedding planning. Carmen was beaming as she watched, occasionally squeezing Robert's hand or whispering comments to him. The guests were clearly enjoying it too, smiling and pointing at particularly cute photos. Then came the engagement photos, professional shots of Carmen and Robert looking picture perfect in various romantic settings. These were the photos that had been featured in the society pages when their engagement was announced, the images that had cemented their status as one of the city's most glamorous couples. I could feel my heart pounding as the slideshow approached its end. The innocent photos were almost over. In just a few seconds, Tyler's laptop would start displaying the images I'd added, the photos that would destroy everything Carmen thought she knew about her new husband. The last official photo faded from the screen, and there was a moment of darkness as the presentation transitioned to my additions. I held my breath. Then the first photo appeared. It was the image of Robert and Anna holding hands as they walked into the restaurant. The photo was clear, well lit, unmistakably showing Robert in an intimate pose with a woman who was definitely not Carmen. The reaction was immediate. Gasps went up from around the room and I heard someone say, "Is that?" The murmur of confused voices grew louder as people tried to process what they were seeing. Carmen's smile faded. She looked confused, then concerned, then horrified as she stared at the image on the screen. "What is this?" she said, but her voice was lost in the growing noise from the crowd. The second photo appeared, the kiss in Anna's apartment doorway. This one was even more damning, showing Robert and Anna in a clearly romantic embrace. There was no way to misinterpret what was happening in this image. Carmen shot to her feet so fast that her chair fell backward. "Stop it," she screamed. "Turn it off." But Tyler, confused and probably panicking, didn't immediately respond. The third photo appeared on screen, Robert and Anna grocery shopping together, looking comfortable and domestic. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Guests were talking loudly, some standing up to get a better look at the screen, others pulling out their phones to record what was happening. I could hear fragments of shocked conversations. "Is that Robert? Who is that woman? Oh my God, at his own wedding. Someone needs to turn that off." Robert had gone completely pale. He stood up and reached for Carmen, but she jerked away from him like his touch burned. "Carmen, let me explain," he started to say. "Explain what?" Carmen's voice was raw with rage and pain. "Explain why you're cheating on me? Explain why there are pictures of you with another woman at my wedding. The fourth photo appeared, Robert leaving Anna's apartment late at night. By now, Tyler had apparently figured out that this wasn't the kind of surprise he'd thought he was helping with, and I saw him frantically trying to shut off the projector. But the damage was done. Carmen turned to face the room full of guests, her face twisted with humiliation and fury. These were her friends, her family, the people whose opinions mattered most to her social standing. And they had all just seen undeniable proof that her perfect husband was a cheater. "Get out!" she screamed at the crowd. "Everyone get out!" But nobody moved. They were too shocked, too fascinated by the drama unfolding in front of them. This was better than any reality TV show, and they had front row seats. The fifth and final photo appeared on the screen, Anna's Instagram post with Robert's hand visible in the corner. The caption was clearly visible, "Amazing night with my love." That photo broke something in Carmen. She let out a sound that was part scream, part sob, and lunged toward Robert with her hands raised like she wanted to claw his eyes out. Robert caught her wrists, trying to restrain her without hurting her. "Carmen, please just let me explain. It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" Carmen's voice was getting higher and more hysterical. "She called you her love. On social media. While you were engaged to me." Finally, Tyler managed to shut off the projector, plunging the screen into darkness. But it was too late. Everyone in that room had seen the photos. Everyone knew that Robert Sterling had been cheating on his bride. Carmen's perfect wedding had become a public disaster. The silence that followed the projector shutting off was deafening. 300 guests sat frozen in their chairs, staring at Carmen and Robert like they were watching a car accident in slow motion. Nobody seemed to know what to do, what to say, whether they should leave or stay or pretend they hadn't seen what they just witnessed. Carmen stood there in her beautiful reception dress, her perfect makeup streaked with tears, her hands still raised as if she wanted to strike Robert. For a moment she looked lost, like she couldn't quite process what had just happened. Then her gaze swept across the room, taking in all the shocked faces, all the people who had come to celebrate her perfect day and instead witnessed her complete humiliation. I could see the exact moment when the full impact hit her. Not just that Robert had cheated, but that everyone she cared about impressing now knew about it. Her eyes found mine across the crowded ballroom, and I saw recognition dawn on her face. She knew. Somehow, she knew I was responsible for this. "You," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow carrying across the silent room. "You did this." I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "I thought you should know the truth about your husband." "The truth?" Carmen's voice was getting stronger, more furious. "You want to talk about truth? The truth is that you're jealous. You've always been jealous of me, and you couldn't stand to see me happy." "Carmen," Robert tried to interrupt, but she whirled on him. "Don't," she screamed. "Don't you dare say my name. Don't you dare try to talk to me." She turned back to me, her face contorted with rage. "How long have you known?" "About a month," I said calmly. "A month?" The word came out as a shriek. "You knew for a month and you said nothing? You let me plan this wedding, spend all this money, invite all these people, and you said nothing? Would you have believed me if I'd told you privately?" I asked. "Or would you have called me a liar and cut me out of your life?" Carmen opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. We both knew the answer to that question. "So instead you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone I know," she said, her voice breaking. "In front of my friends, my family, my colleagues. You decided to destroy the most important day of my life." "I decided to give you the truth," I said. "The same way you gave me your version of the truth at your engagement party." A murmur went through the crowd as people remembered the engagement party, remembered Carmen's public humiliation of me. I could see some guests nodding slightly, beginning to understand that this wasn't just random cruelty. This was payback. Carmen's face went white as she realized that people were making the connection. "That was different," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "How was it different?" I asked. "You humiliated me in front of your friends because you could. Because you wanted to put me in my place, remind everyone that I was less than you. Well, Carmen, congratulations. You taught me exactly how it feels to be torn down in public. And now you get to experience it for yourself." Robert finally found his voice. "Carmen, please, can we go somewhere private and talk about this? All these people don't need to." "Private?" Carmen laughed, but there was no humor in it. "It's a little late for private, don't you think? Everyone here has already seen the photos. Everyone already knows that my husband is a cheating bastard who was planning to continue his affair after our wedding." More gasps from the crowd. Apparently not everyone had picked up on that detail. "How long?" Carmen demanded, turning back to Robert. How long have you been with her? Robert looked around the room desperately, as if hoping someone would rescue him from this situation. Carmen, this isn't the place. Answer me. 6 months, he said quietly. The number hit Carmen like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward. 6 months, she repeated. We got engaged 8 months ago. So you've been cheating on me for almost our entire engagement. Robert didn't deny it. Who is she? Carmen asked. Her name is Anna, I said when Robert remained silent. Anna Mitchell. She's a graphic designer. She lives about 15 minutes from here. Carmen looked at me with something that might have been admiration mixed with her hatred. You really did your homework, didn't you? I wanted to be thorough. And did your homework tell you that I love him? Carmen's voice cracked on the last word. Did it tell you that I thought I was marrying the man I was going to spend the rest of my life with? For the first time since this all started, I felt a pang of genuine remorse. Whatever Carmen's faults, whatever she'd done to me over the years, she was genuinely heartbroken. She really had loved Robert or thought she did. Did your homework tell you, Carmen continued, her voice getting stronger again, that revenge isn't the same as justice? Did it tell you that destroying someone else's happiness doesn't actually make you happy? Before I could answer, we were interrupted by a commotion near the entrance to the ballroom. Someone was pushing through the crowd and I heard a woman's voice calling out. Robert? Robert, what's going on? I saw all the cars outside and... The crowd parted and Anna Mitchell walked into the ballroom. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, clearly not dressed for a wedding reception. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she looked worried and confused. She obviously had no idea what she was walking into. When she saw Robert standing at the head table in his tuxedo, her face went white. When she saw Carmen in her wedding dress, she looked like she might faint. The ballroom went completely silent. Everyone was staring at Anna, the other woman, the one whose photos had just destroyed a marriage before it even had a chance to begin. Oh God, Anna whispered, her hand going to her mouth. Oh God, Robert, what have you done? Carmen turned to look at Anna, taking in her appearance, her obvious distress, the way she was looking at Robert with something that looked like love and horror combined. You're her? Carmen said. It wasn't a question. Anna nodded miserably. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I mean, I knew you were getting married, but Robert said, he said. He said what? Carmen's voice was deadly quiet. Anna looked at Robert desperately, but he was staring at the floor, apparently unable to meet anyone's eyes. He said it was just for business, Anna whispered. He said you came from the right family, that the marriage would help his career, but that he didn't actually love you. He said he loved me. Another collective gasp from the crowd. This was better than any soap opera. Carmen looked from Anna to Robert and back again, processing this information. So not only were you cheating on me, she said to Robert, but you were lying to her too, telling her that our relationship meant nothing, that you were only marrying me for money and connections. Robert finally looked up. Carmen, I can explain. No, Carmen said firmly. No more explaining. No more lying. I think we've all heard enough truth for one evening. She turned to face the room full of guests, straightening her shoulders and lifting her chin. Despite everything that had just happened, despite the tears and the humiliation, she suddenly looked regal again. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. I want to thank you all for coming tonight. I'm sorry you had to witness this unpleasantness, but I suppose it's better that we all learn the truth now rather than later. She looked directly at me. My sister has given me quite a wedding gift tonight. The gift of seeing exactly who I married, and exactly what my marriage was worth to him. Then she turned to Robert. I want you out of my house tonight. I want you to take your things and go to her, she gestured toward Anna, since that's obviously where you'd rather be anyway. Carmen, please. I'm not finished, Carmen said sharply. I also want you to know that my father's law firm will be in touch with you first thing Monday morning. If you think this marriage gave you any claim to my family's money or connections, you're about to learn how wrong you are. She turned to Anna, who was still standing there looking mortified. And you, Carmen said. I don't blame you entirely. He lied to both of us. But now you have him all to yourself. I hope he's worth it. Finally, she turned back to address the crowd one last time. The reception is over, she announced. Thank you all for coming. I'm sure this will give you something interesting to talk about for weeks. With that, she gathered up her train and walked out of the ballroom, her head held high despite everything that had just happened. The room erupted in chaos as 300 guests all started talking at once, but I barely heard any of it. I was watching Carmen walk away, and for the first time since I'd started planning this revenge, I wondered if I'd gone too far. I'd wanted her to understand how it felt to be humiliated in public. I'd wanted her to experience the same shame and embarrassment she'd put me through. Mission accomplished. But looking at her now, watching her walk away from the ruins of her perfect wedding with as much dignity as she could muster, I wasn't sure victory felt the way I'd thought it would. I left the reception shortly after Carmen did, slipping out through a side door while the guests were still buzzing about what they'd just witnessed. I could hear fragments of conversation as I passed through the crowd, shocked whispers about Robert's betrayal, speculation about how long the affair had been going on, surprised comments about my role in exposing it all. I had no idea Carmen's sister had it in her. I heard someone say, "Did you see Robert's face when those photos came up? That poor girl finding out like that on her wedding day." Though after what Carmen did to her at the engagement party, I guess she had it coming. That last comment stopped me in my tracks. So people had remembered the engagement party. They understood that this wasn't just random cruelty, it was calculated revenge. I made it to my car and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. It was done. After weeks of planning, months of enduring Carmen's treatment, years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, I had finally struck back. So why didn't I feel better? My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Jessica, my coworker. "Just saw something on social media about your sister's wedding. Are you okay? Call me." Word was already spreading online. Of course it was. 300 people had just witnessed the most dramatic wedding disaster of the year. Someone had probably live-streamed the whole thing. I drove home in a daze, my mind replaying the events of the evening over and over. Carmen's face when she first saw the photos. Robert's pathetic attempts to explain himself. Anna showing up at the worst possible moment. Carmen's final, dignified exit from the ruins of her perfect day. When I got to my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, finally allowing myself to really think about what I'd done. I had destroyed my sister's wedding. I had exposed her husband's affair in front of 300 people. I had humiliated her in exactly the way she had humiliated me, except worse, much worse. And I had probably destroyed any chance of ever having a normal relationship with her again. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Natasha," she said, and I could hear the strain in her voice. "I just got a call from Carmen. She's very upset. She told me what happened at the wedding about the photos. She says you were responsible." I closed my eyes. Yes, I was responsible. "Honey, what were you thinking? Carmen is devastated. She's talking about divorce lawyers and restraining orders and she never wants to see you again." "I was thinking that she deserved to know the truth about her husband," I said. "But did you have to do it like that? In front of everyone? On her wedding day?" I thought about that question. Did I have to do it like that? Could I have found another way, a more private way, a less devastating way? Would she have believed me if I'd told her privately? I asked. My mother was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," she admitted. "Carmen can be stubborn when it comes to admitting she's wrong about someone. She humiliated me at her engagement party, Mom. In front of all her friends. She called me ugly, said I didn't belong there, made everyone laugh at me." "I know, honey. And that was wrong of her. But this is so much worse." "Was it worse? Or was it just more public?" "She needed to know who she was marrying," I said. Robert was planning to continue his affair after the wedding. Carmen would have spent her whole marriage living a lie. "Maybe," my mother said. "But that was her choice to make, not yours." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about my mother's words. Had I taken away Carmen's choice? Had I decided for her that she was better off knowing the truth, regardless of how much it would hurt? Over the next few days, the story spread through our social circle like wildfire. It was the kind of scandal that people couldn't stop talking about. A cheating groom exposed at his own wedding reception, dramatic photos, public accusations, the other woman showing up at the worst possible moment. I heard through mutual friends that Carmen had indeed filed for divorce immediately. She'd also kicked Robert out of the house they'd been sharing and had her father's lawyers draw up papers to make sure he couldn't claim any of her family's assets. Robert apparently had moved in with Anna. Whether that relationship would survive the chaos they'd all been through remained to be seen. Carmen had also, according to my mother, made it clear that she never wanted to see or speak to me again. She told our parents that as far as she was concerned, she no longer had a sister. That hurt more than I'd expected it to. Jessica came over the following weekend, bringing takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine. "So," she said, settling onto my couch, "do you want to talk about it?" I told her everything. The photos, the planning, Tyler's unwitting cooperation. The moment when the slideshow started and Carmen's world fell apart. "Damn," Jessica said when I finished. "You really went nuclear." "I know. Do you regret it?" I thought about that question. Did I regret it? "I regret that it had to happen that way," I said finally. "I regret that she got hurt so badly. But I don't regret that she found out the truth about Robert. Even though she hates you now? Even though she hates me now." Jessica studied my face. "You know, for someone who just got the ultimate revenge on her sister, you don't look very satisfied." She was right. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt empty. Hollow. Like I'd won a battle but lost something important in the process. "I thought it would feel better," I admitted. "I thought that finally standing up to her, finally making her experience what she put me through, would make me feel strong and vindicated. But it doesn't. It just makes me feel sad. For both of us." Jessica reached over and squeezed my hand. "Maybe that means you're a better person than you thought you were." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Carmen, wondering where she was, how she was dealing with everything that had happened. Was she staying with friends? Had she gone to our parents' house? Was she crying herself to sleep, or was she channeling her pain into anger and planning her next move? I also thought about Robert and Anna. Were they happy now that their relationship was out in the open? Or were they dealing with their own guilt and regret about how everything had unfolded? 3 weeks after the wedding, I ran into Mrs. Patterson at the grocery store. She was one of the women who had laughed when Carmen humiliated me at the engagement party, and I wasn't sure how she would react to seeing me. "Natasha," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine, thank you," I said, waiting to see what she would say next. She looked around to make sure no one else was listening, then leaned closer to me. "I wanted you to know," she said quietly, "that what Carmen did to you at the engagement party was wrong. I should have said something then, but I didn't. I'm sorry about that." I was surprised by her honesty. "Thank you for saying that. What you did at the wedding." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It was shocking. But I understand why you did it. Carmen needed to know the truth about Robert, and she probably wouldn't have believed you if you'd told her privately." "Probably not," I agreed. "Still," Mrs. Patterson said, "I hope you two can work things out eventually. Family is important even when family is complicated." After she left, I thought about her words. Family is important even when family is complicated. Was there any chance that Carmen and I could eventually repair our relationship? Or had I damaged it beyond repair? A month after the wedding, I finally got my answer. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a law firm's courier service. My name and address were typed on expensive letterhead, and for a moment I wondered if Robert was trying to sue me for something related to the wedding disaster. But when I opened it, I saw Carmen's signature at the bottom. The letter was formal, written in legal language, but the message was clear. Carmen was officially cutting all ties with me. She didn't want me to contact her, didn't want me at family gatherings if she was going to be there, and had instructed her lawyers to send this letter as a formal notice that she considered our relationship over. "Your actions at my wedding," the letter read, "were designed to cause maximum humiliation and pain. While you may have convinced yourself that you were acting in my best interests, we both know that you were motivated by jealousy and revenge. I cannot and will not forgive what you did to me. As of the date of this letter, I no longer consider you my sister." I read the letter 3 times, then set it aside and tried to go about my normal day. But Carmen's words kept echoing in my head. "I no longer consider you my sister." That evening my mother called. "Did you get a letter from Carmen today?" she asked. "Yes. She sent one to your father and me too. She's asking us to choose between you two. She says she won't come to family events if you're going to be there." My heart sank. "What did you tell her?" "We told her that we loved both our daughters and we're not choosing sides," my mother said firmly. "But Natasha, this has to stop. This feud between you two is tearing our family apart." "I didn't start this feud, Mom." "Maybe not, but you certainly escalated it. Carmen is talking about moving to another city, starting over somewhere where people don't know about what happened at her wedding." The thought of Carmen leaving, of never seeing her again, hit me harder than I'd expected. Despite everything that had happened between us, despite all the years of cruelty and competition, she was still my sister. The idea of her disappearing from my life completely felt wrong. "Maybe that would be best for everyone," I said, "but I didn't really mean it." "Would it?" my mother asked. "Would it really be best? Or would it just be easier?" After we hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about my mother's question. Would it be easier if Carmen moved away? Would it be easier to never have to see her again, never have to deal with the complicated mess of our relationship? Maybe. But easier wasn't the same as better. 2 months after the wedding, I heard through my mother that Carmen's divorce from Robert had been finalized. It was one of the fastest divorces in the county's history, thanks to the prenuptial agreement Carmen's father had insisted on and Robert's obvious infidelity. Carmen had also gotten her old job back at the marketing firm where she'd worked before her engagement. She'd taken a step down from the position she'd hoped to have as Robert's wife, but she was supporting herself and rebuilding her life. Robert, according to the gossip mill, was not doing as well. His affair with Anna had ended shortly after the wedding disaster, apparently unable to survive the stress and public scrutiny. He'd also lost several important business clients who didn't want to be associated with someone who'd been caught cheating on his wedding day. I should have felt vindicated by Robert's downfall. He'd hurt Carmen, lied to Anna, and generally behaved like a selfish, entitled person who thought he could have whatever he wanted without consequences. But mostly I just felt tired. 3 months after the wedding, I made a decision. I sat down at my computer and wrote Carmen a letter. Not a legal document like the one she'd sent me, but a real letter from one sister to another. Carmen, I wrote, I know you don't want to hear from me and I understand why. What I did at your wedding was cruel and public and designed to hurt you in the worst possible way. I told myself I was protecting you from Robert's lies, but the truth is that I was also getting revenge for years of feeling like I wasn't good enough to be your sister. I paused, staring at the words on the screen. Was I really going to admit that? Was I going to acknowledge that my motives hadn't been purely noble? You were right when you said I was motivated by jealousy and revenge, I continued. I was jealous of your beauty, your confidence, your ability to command attention in any room. I was tired of always being the ugly sister, the one who didn't matter, the one people forgot about 5 minutes after meeting. I took a break from writing and made myself a cup of tea, then came back to the letter. But I want you to know that even though my motives were mixed, I don't regret that you found out the truth about Robert. He was planning to continue his affair after your wedding. He told Anna that he was only marrying you for business reasons, that he didn't actually love you. You deserved better than that, Carmen. You deserved a husband who loved you completely and faithfully. I wrote about our childhood, about the way our relationship had developed over the years, about my own insecurities and how they had shaped the way I responded to her treatment of me. I know you think I'm weak, I wrote, and maybe I was. Maybe I should have stood up to you years ago, should have told you how much your words hurt me instead of letting the resentment build up until it exploded at your wedding. Maybe if I'd been stronger, braver, more honest about my feelings, we could have worked things out between us like real sisters should. I ended the letter with an apology, not for exposing Robert's affair, but for the way I'd done it, and for letting my own pain turn me into someone who was capable of causing such public humiliation. I miss my sister, I wrote. Not the person who made me feel small and worthless, but the sister who taught me to ride a bike when I was 6, who shared her Halloween candy with me even though she said it was because I was too ugly to get my own, who cried when I left for college because she said the house would be too quiet without me. I printed the letter and mailed it to Carmen's new apartment, not expecting a response but needing to say what I'd written. A week later my phone rang. It was Carmen. I got your letter, she said without preamble. I wasn't sure you'd read it. I almost didn't. But curiosity got the better of me. There was a long pause. I could hear traffic in the background like she was calling from her car. You were right about Robert, she said finally. He was planning to continue the affair. Anna told me that after everything happened. He'd promised her that once we were married and the business connections were secured, he'd find a way to be with her more openly. I'm sorry, I said. Are you? Are you really sorry, or are you just saying that because you think it's what I want to hear? I thought about her question. I'm sorry that he hurt you. I'm sorry that you had to find out the way you did. I'm sorry that I let my own anger and jealousy turn me into someone who could do what I did. But you're not sorry that the wedding was ruined. No, I admitted. I'm not sorry about that. You would have been miserable married to him. Another long pause. You know what the worst part is? Carmen said. The worst part is that I keep thinking about what you wrote in your letter, about feeling like the ugly sister. Because the truth is, Natasha, you were never ugly. You were just different from me and I was too insecure and competitive to appreciate those differences. I felt tears starting in my eyes. I made you feel bad about yourself because it made me feel better about myself, Carmen continued. And that's not what sisters are supposed to do to each other. No, I agreed. It's not. I'm not ready to forgive you yet, she said. What you did, it's going to take me a long time to get past it. But I wanted you to know that I read your letter, and I understand why you did it. That's more than I expected, I said. Maybe someday we can figure out how to be real sisters to each other, Carmen said. The kind who build each other up instead of tearing each other down. I'd like that, I said. Me too. She hung up without saying goodbye, but for the first time in months I felt something that might have been hope. 6 months after the wedding, my life had settled into a new normal. I'd gotten a promotion at work. My boss Patricia said my newfound confidence and assertiveness had impressed the company's executives. I'd also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Rodriguez, who was helping me work through years of family dysfunction and my own issues with self-worth. Revenge, Dr. Rodriguez had told me during one of our sessions, is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. It might feel satisfying in the moment, but it ultimately hurts you more than anyone else. She was right. The satisfaction I'd felt watching Carmen's world crumble had been brief and shallow. The guilt and regret that followed had lasted much longer. But I was learning to live with what I'd done, and more importantly, I was learning to understand why I'd done it. The little girl who had always felt like she wasn't good enough, who had spent years accepting cruelty because she thought that's what she deserved, had finally fought back. The method had been wrong, but the impulse to defend herself had been healthy. You're not the same person who planned that revenge, Dr. Rodriguez said. You've grown. You've learned from your mistakes. The question now is what you're going to do with that growth. What I was going to do, I decided, was build a life that made me happy. Not a life designed to compete with Carmen or prove anything to anyone else, but a life that felt authentic and fulfilling to me. I started taking art classes on weekends, something I'd always wanted to do but had never made time for. I joined a hiking group and discovered that I loved being outdoors. I volunteered at a literacy program helping adults learn to read. And then, 8 months after the wedding, I met Anthony. He was a teacher at the school where I was volunteering, a kind, funny man with gentle eyes and a laugh that made me feel lighter. He didn't know anything about my family drama or the wedding disaster when we first started talking. To him, I was just Natasha, a woman who donated her Saturday mornings to help people learn to read. Our first date was coffee after a volunteer session. Our second was a hike in the mountains outside the city. By our third date, I knew I was falling for him and the feeling seemed to be mutual. You have this strength about you, he told me one evening as we walked through the park near my apartment. Like you've been through some difficult things but came out stronger because of them. If only he knew. I told Anthony about Carmen and the wedding disaster on our 2-month anniversary. We were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant, and somehow the conversation had turned to family relationships. I have a sister, I said. We don't really speak anymore. That's sad, Anthony said. What happened? So I told him. All of it. The years of emotional abuse, the engagement party humiliation, the discovery of Robert's affair, and my decision to expose it at the wedding reception. Anthony listened without judgment, asking questions for clarification but never making me feel like I needed to defend my actions. That must have been incredibly difficult, he said when I finished. Both what she put you through growing up and the decision you made about the wedding. Do you think I was wrong? I asked. To do it the way I did? Anthony considered the question seriously. I think you were hurt and angry and looking for a way to make the pain stop. I think you found a way that felt like justice at the time, even though it ended up hurting both of you. But do you think I was wrong? I think you're human, he said simply. Humans make mistakes when they're in pain. The important thing is that you've learned from it. A year after the wedding, Carmen and I had our first real conversation since the phone call after my letter. She called me on my birthday, something she hadn't done in years even before our falling out. Happy birthday, she said when I answered the phone. Thank you, I said, surprised to hear from her. I've been thinking about you today. About us. About the conversation we should have had years ago. I sat down on my couch, sensing this was going to be important. I've been in therapy, Carmen said. Working through some things about myself, about our relationship, about the way I treated you growing up. That's good, I said. My therapist asked me to think about why I felt the need to tear you down all the time. Why I couldn't just let you exist without constantly comparing you to me or making you feel bad about yourself. What did you figure out? Carmen was quiet for a moment. I figured out that I was terrified you were better than me. Not prettier. I always knew I was prettier. But kinder, smarter in ways that mattered, more genuine. You had this authenticity that I envied, this ability to just be yourself without constantly performing for other people. I felt tears starting in my eyes. So I decided to make you feel as insecure as I felt, Carmen continued. If I could convince you that you weren't good enough, then I didn't have to worry about you outshining me. Carmen. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said quickly. I know I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I understand now why you did what you did at the wedding. I'd spent years making you feel powerless and you finally found a way to take some power back. It wasn't the right way, I said. No, it wasn't. But I understand it. We talked for another hour, really talked, maybe for the first time in our adult lives. Carmen told me about her therapy, about the work she was doing to understand her own insecurities and competitive nature. I told her about Anthony, about my own therapy, about the life I was building for myself. I'm proud of you, she said before we hung up. For standing up for yourself, for getting help, for building a life that makes you happy. I should have said that to you years ago. We were both too young and too hurt to know how to be good sisters to each other, I said. Maybe it's not too late to learn. Maybe not, Carmen agreed. 2 years after the wedding, Carmen came to my housewarming party when Anthony and I moved in together. It was the first time we'd seen each other in person since the wedding disaster, and I was nervous about how it would go. But when she arrived at my door, carrying a bottle of wine and a small potted plant, she looked different. Softer somehow. Less armored. Your house is beautiful, she said, looking around the small 2-bedroom place Anthony and I had bought together. It feels like you. Like home. Thank you, I said, touched by the sincerity in her voice. She was polite to Anthony, asking about his work and listening with genuine interest when he talked about his students. She complimented my cooking and offered to help clean up after the party. She was, in short, behaving like a normal sister at a normal family gathering. As she was leaving that night, she hugged me goodbye. I missed you, she said quietly. I missed having a sister. I missed you too, I said and meant it. 3 years after the wedding, Carmen met someone new. His name was Marcus Chin, and he was a social worker who specialized in helping kids from difficult backgrounds. He was nothing like Robert, quiet where Robert had been flashy, thoughtful where Robert had been impulsive, genuine where Robert had been calculating. He doesn't care about my family's money or connections, Carmen told me when she called to tell me about him. He barely even knows about any of that stuff. He likes me for me, not for what I can do for him. How does that feel? I asked. Terrifying, Carmen admitted, but also wonderful. I met Marcus at a family barbecue at our parents' house. The first family gathering Carmen and I had both attended since before her wedding to Robert. He was exactly as Carmen had described him. Kind, intelligent, and completely unimpressed by the superficial things that had always mattered so much to Carmen's previous boyfriends. Your sister talks about you a lot, he told me when we found ourselves alone by the grill. She says she's learning how to be a better sister by watching how you handle relationships. I was surprised by that. Really? She said you taught her that love isn't supposed to hurt. That families should build each other up, not tear each other down. I thought about that conversation for days afterward. Had I really taught Carmen those things? Or had she learned them despite me, through her own growth and therapy and the hard work of becoming a better person? Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe what mattered was that we were both learning, both growing, both trying to become the kind of sisters we should have been all along. 4 years after the wedding, Carmen and Marcus got engaged. She called me first, before she called our parents, before she posted anything on social media. I wanted you to be the first to know, she said. Will you be my maid of honor? I was quiet for a moment, overwhelmed by the gesture. Are you sure? I asked. After everything that happened at your last wedding? Especially because of everything that happened at my last wedding, Carmen said. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I was too angry to see it at the time, but you did me a favor. I didn't do it as a favor, I said honestly. I did it for revenge. I know, but that doesn't change the result. You kept me from marrying someone who would have made me miserable. And more importantly, you taught me that I deserved better than Robert. Yes, I said. I'll be your maid of honor. Carmen's second wedding was everything her first wedding should have been. Small, intimate, filled with people who genuinely cared about the bride and groom rather than people who just wanted to be seen at the social event of the season. Carmen wore a simple dress that made her look radiant, and Marcus looked at her like she was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen. Standing beside Carmen as her maid of honor, watching her marry a man who actually loved her, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. The anger and resentment I'd carried for so many years was gone, replaced by genuine happiness for my sister. During her vows, Carmen said something that made me cry. Marcus, she said, you taught me that love isn't about competition or comparison or trying to be someone I'm not. You taught me that I'm worthy of love just as I am, flaws and all. And you taught me that the people who really love us want to see us become the best versions of ourselves, not smaller versions of ourselves. She glanced at me as she said this, and I knew she was thinking about our journey as sisters, about how we'd both learn to love each other better. The reception was held in our parents' backyard, under string lights and paper lanterns. There was no dramatic slideshow, no shocking revelations, no public humiliation. Just dancing and laughter and the kind of joy that comes from celebrating something real and genuine. "Thank you," Carmen said to me as we danced together during the sister dance Marcus had requested. "For what?" "For being brave enough to tell me the truth even when it was hard. For showing me what real strength looks like. For becoming the sister I always needed but was too stubborn to appreciate." "We both had some growing up to do," I said. "Yes, but you grew first. You showed me the way." As I looked around at the celebration, at Carmen and Marcus slow dancing, at our parents talking with Marcus's family, at Anthony helping the caterer serve dessert, I realized that this was what I'd been looking for all along. Not revenge, not vindication, not the satisfaction of proving I was good enough. Just this. A family that loved each other well with all our flaws and mistakes and complicated history. A family that had learned how to build each other up instead of tearing each other down. It had taken us longer than it should have, and we'd hurt each other more than we needed to. But we'd gotten here eventually. And sometimes that's enough. 5 years after the first wedding, Carmen and I were truly sisters for the first time in our lives. We talked every week, celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through challenges. When I got promoted to department manager at work, Carmen was the first person I called. When she and Marcus decided to try for a baby, she asked me to be the godmother. The woman who had once called me ugly at her engagement party had become my best friend. And the woman who had once destroyed her sister's wedding out of revenge had learned to love without keeping score. We both got our happy endings in the end. They just looked different than either of us had expected.